to talk inevitably about the new program Roots, the remaking of the 70s television event series that I think we can safely say the generation of people is the most watched program ever on American television, I learned, and hearing about coverage of the remake. The remake is beautiful. I will just start this off by saying that I am predisposed to liking the series. Um, Overall, I'm a black person, and as a black person from America, certainly we can say that there's been an air of propaganda around who we are and how we are as a people and as American people. And so we were hungry, certainly, for representations of black people. And at the time when Roots came out, um, I, I remember seeing it on television in a replay. I don't think I saw it originally, maybe. I can't even remember how old I was. I remember my mother's best friend reading us the book. She read to her son and I a few lines even. She said, just encouraged us, and we also read. So, we heard the stories of the books. People called me Kunta Kinte. My last name is Kuku, and I'm identifiably an African name. And so that was even one of the jokes that people thought would hurt me. Even look, you look like Kunta Kinte this and Kunta Kinte that, but what I had even by then learned to see that this was something that I should and could be proud of. So this remake of Roots must also be seen in this historical context. So Roots has happened, but also generations, decades later, Django happened. We just saw Underground this year. So. And on and on and on. So we have to see this Roots within the context of having seen all of that, which is dramatically different. And a bid to that, of course, is in the first scene of the first episode where LeVar Burton, who played the original Kunta Kinte, and this was so bittersweet and sad, played, anonymous slave being drug off as soon as Kunta Kinte landed on the shores. And that he's the sort of the first slave that he sees being drug off. And it's a very bittersweet gesture. Because as we will see, the intergenerationality that's even suggested by even that relationship between LeVar Burton, that actor, and the current actor playing Kunta Kinte, and this is echoed in the story itself. I mean, we see echoes of Kunta Kinte, and this is, listen close, because this is the heart of I believe, of the thread that runs through Roots, is we see actually Kunta Kinte taken from a village in what's now the Gambia, and we see him brought to the shores. We see him becoming a slave. We see how a slave is made and his foot is chopped off as a runaway. And yet we see through each episode, which follows a different person in his generation, we see how they remember him and how they know him. They're still talking about Mandingo warriors and my grandfather and my great-grandfather, Kunta Kinte, even in the last scene of the last part of the series. So the intergenerationality is something that, again, I think as a black viewer, I certainly felt, and people around me felt on this particular level, and it's that not only do you see Kunta Kinte, the African, but you see his daughter, you see the generations as they go. So literally, the closer to in time that we get, people start to look more and talk more like us. So literally by the final episode, the people look and talk very much like modern day black Americans, notably and noticeably different. And this is very subtle in the series, the Americanization of these Africans. And so watching that as a black spectator, of course, you are seeing and hearing people who look and sound like your uncles and brothers and sisters and mothers and daughters and sons. And there is that, and we think, well, gosh, if that's what they got from Kunta Kinte, what did we get from Kunta Kinte? And they, of course, left some of those, again, that dropping of that through the series of Kunta Kinte's song, the song that he sang from his mother, that we saw in the first episode that he sings to soothe the man next to him who wants to die, the slave next to him on the slave ship. Imagine the disarray that they're in at that time. He sings the song to them, to that man. He teaches the song to the fiddler reluctantly later. Fiddler plays the song in the white to-dos for, to earn his bread and in his favor and keep in the master's eyes. And then the song really gets translated over and over and over, regurgitated through the generations. And there's even a point in the later part of the series where they say, Chicken George, the final descendant of Kunta Kinte that we see, remarks that, wow, that's, the song that my grandmother sang and Kunta Kinte sang, and that came from Africa, and we know that it's ours, and they don't know, and yet they're dancing to it. And it's always this mix mash of cultures, of course, that you see. And what's interesting about these stories, and what's interesting again about this Roots, and as it's being told now, and again in the post, Roots and decades later, Django and other kind of slave narratives that have come about, and more public readings and viewings of even just incidents in the life of a slave girl, and of course Beloved, and then people like me who've also actually been to the Gambia. So in light of all of that, and in light of now the soundtracks are hip hop, the intergenerationality of the music also rings through, and that's where I'd like to bring this around to, where you again hear the sub-narrative of the intergenerationality of this, and it's one of the strongest messages that one gets from Roots, and we are in no way distinct, just cut off from our past, even those of us who came here literally in chains and were mixed and mashed, mutilated to the point where we were almost unrecognizable. Even we were recognizable to ourselves, and it was often and also through music. So how befitting that with all the new music out here, Underground, for example, the whole series has a wonderful soundtrack, original soundtrack. But this show, Roots, as well, the soundtrack is really nice, modern. And that's why it's so fascinating that the song that I can point out most that brings together the series is Soon I Will Be Done. It's an actual slave narrative that quite literally may have come from that time. Could have been a song that they started to sing then, as we know, what we call Negro spirituals. And interestingly, of course, they play the one, the iconic one, in my view, by Mahalia Jackson, that slow marching Soon I Will Be Done with the troubles of the world. And it's in the scene when Chicken George, this is so sad, when Chicken George comes back after 20 years of being snatched away just to pay off his master's debt, snatched away in an instant after having won his freedom only moments later, coming back after 20 years to see his wife, his children, and now his grandchildren, and being, greeted at the big house like a slave, even though he was a free man, being stripped, hands up, don't shoot, and then being told that just because he could, the master said, kid, you're going to have to wait to the end of your shift that you can even come down and greet this man that you haven't seen and didn't know what happened to for 20 years. And so in this moments that they're waiting for the end of her shift, for the sun to set, they play Soon I Will Be Done. And you just see the sweet nothings, the stolen looks, glances, and smiles between them that take place over the few hours, of course, the long summer days. And it's so sweet because it's juxtaposed against, this a freeman waiting on the road, and the slave woman, and the slaves in the field. They show the slaves in the field. But she's serving. She literally is dressed up like Aunt Jemima. Literally has on, a red checkered scarf, a wide fluttering, skirt. She's literally that beautiful charcoal, and she's serving her mistress, who we find out is dying of some affliction, and the society itself is dying. It's a year before the Civil War. And in the middle of all of this, in the middle of having to do this thing, serve them for generation upon generation, what we're forced to look at as a spectator is their love. Everything else it falls into the background. When you're just thinking about and hearing, Soon I Will Be Done with the troubles of the world. And the troubles of the world, just in this moment, for the purpose of this scene, are my long lost husband, how we were lost. And of course, we as Black people recognize then how his kids, some of them even reject him, refuse to even get to know him and recognize certainly their Chicken George in themselves. We all know that. We all know that our system has stripped us of our abilities to be full parents to our children. And we know the damage that causes intergenerationally. And so seeing that and seeing the birth of that right there on the plantation, it's hard to watch. And I think a lot of people say that things like this are hard to watch because of they imagine the brutality of, okay, so they're in chains and they get whipped, and we know that kind of scene of my name is Kunta Kinte, not Toby, where he's literally whipped almost to the point of death. Can't whip them to death because they're slaves, they're property. And you see the immense value that this commodity has for this entire economy, and yet it's in the background. That's why it's not brutal to watch from that perspective. Slavery itself is in the background, but even the intimacy, that deep, deep intimacy that people are able to drag up and muster upon themselves when, after generations, they've not seen or heard of anything called freedom. They've not even literally been able to imagine it. So there's someone who's free. I'm looking at them standing there, they're free. Most slaves have not even seen a free black person. So even their presence, of course, in the opening to this scene, where Chicken George shows up on the plantation, even just his presence as a dressed up fancy nigger, as they said, is a threat. Threat, causing insurrection amongst their niggers. And so it is such a powerful scene, and I think that it embodies the entire series of Roots, of how much they had overcome, just to be able to wait that those moments, smile with gratitude and graciousness that they could be there, even just to smile as she has to go serve Missy her tea. It's incredible, this series. You have to see it. Roots.